Do you think? Do you interact with people? Do you occasionally indulge in physical, emotional, or mental violence? Do you resent certain people? Do you hate the kidnappers who kidnapped you or someone known to you? Do you hate your boss for not appreciating your efforts in your workplace? Mr. Lecturer, are you scheming on making Miss Grace queen of carryovers simply because she is unwilling to go to bed with you? If your answer is yes to some or all the questions are enumerated, that simply means you are vulnerable to spiritual attacks. Praying hysterically and dancing in the church or at home for hours, or affiliating yourself with local or international secret cults for protection will not completely exonerate you from spiritual attacks as long as you think and interact with people. No doubt, personal experience is the best teacher. For more than 30 years, I have attended to tons of people under the firm grasp of spiritual attacks from the village and from people whom they offended. My intention is to broaden your understanding concerning spiritual attacks by talking about few cases of spiritual attacks I have come across without mentioning the names of the victims. Mr. Kenneth derives pleasure indulging in midnight prayers regularly, and one of his neighbors appealed to him to pray moderately so that other tenants can sleep well. Mr. Kenneth ignored his neighbor and continued praying loudly each night. The evil-minded neighbor decided to shut him up through diabolical means. The neighbor, with evil intention, cautiously obtained Mr. Kenneth's pant and took it to a powerful black magician. Diabolical rituals were performed on the pant of Mr. Kenneth. The evil spirits serving the black magician tracked down Mr. Kenneth from the scent emanating from his pant. Of a truth, I tell you, evil spirits can easily locate and inflict harm on their human targets through the scent emanating from their stolen pant or panties or bras or piece of clothing, etc. After locating Mr. Kenneth spiritually, the evil spirits waited patiently for the right moment to strike. When the right moment came, they entered into the innermost being of Mr. Kenneth. Once inside, they started draining vitality from the feet, knees, and hips of Mr. Kenneth. And a few weeks later, he became paralyzed and he stopped praying violently during night hours. I have said it once, this is twice. You are vulnerable to spiritual attacks as long as you think and interact with people. Being prayerful alone cannot completely exonerate you from spiritual attacks. You might be very prayerful, okay? And at the same time, you might be doing certain things that makes you vulnerable to the forces of darkness that is lurking around each and every one of us. Of a truth, I tell you, what makes spiritual attack easy is hidden in plain sight. In due course, I will reveal it to you. Mr. Joe was genuinely in love with Margaret, although he had not proposed to her, but it was so glaring to everyone who knew them that they will eventually become husband and wife. Sadly for Mr. Joe, his parents disapproved of his intention to marry Margaret, and they imposed a family friend's daughter on him. Mr. Joe never had the courage to tell his beloved Margaret what his parents was doing to their relationship. Mr. Joe decided to avoid Margaret because he did not want to severely hurt her feelings. Margaret was heartbroken and was yearning for a word of explanation from Mr. Joe, which was never forthcoming. She was so attached to her late grandmother. She began calling upon the spirit of her late grandmother to avenge the wrong done to her by Mr. Joe. In no distance time, Mr. Joe was overtaken by epilepsy. He actually suffered for a pretty long time because his parents were very modern people. They were more interested in prayers and medical therapy and nothing else. An elderly member of Mr. Joe's family approached me and narrated their ordeal to me. The elderly family member persuaded Joe's parents to see me. I told them point blank, they did not act well, they did not act wisely by imposing a strange girl on their son who is already in love with Margaret. I made them to realize that if a particular thing is not well handled, it will certainly lead to another thing. I told them the spirit world is real and the dead are with us. I made them realize Margaret did not consult any voodoo priest to inflict spiritual harm on their son, whom she loved wholeheartedly. Margaret was only craving for an explanation from their son, Joe. She only wanted to know the reason why he decided to dump her. The explanation was not forthcoming, and out of frustration, she kept on calling upon the spirit of her late grandmother to right the wrong done to her. And unknown to Margaret, her emotional prayers galvanized the soul of our late grandmother to fight for our favorite granddaughter. Joe's parents apologized, and a family friend went out and returned with Margaret in my presence. Joe apologized to her. His parents also begged her. They told her they thought she was a wayward township girl, my brother man and sister woman. This is not a matter of bind and cast. Mr. Joe is guilty of wrenching the heart of Margaret. I call upon the soul of Margaret's grandmother to observe that the wrong done to our beloved granddaughter had been taken care of. I thanked her for forcing justice to be done, and I appealed to her to put an end to the spiritual attack. Now, what do you think made the spiritual attack on Mr. Joe easy? Of course, I know that most of you might say, well, Mr. Joe deeply offended her. That's why the spiritual attack took place easily. Your assumption is not the correct answer. I promise to give you the correct answer at the summation part of this great lesson. Kidnapping is commonplace in Nigeria today. Victims of kidnapping suffer from long-standing, deep emotional and mental scars that might take many years to overcome. Kidnappers have a lot of spiritual curses to contend with. All the people they have kidnapped, tormented, and killed, all the family members and friends of the people they have kidnapped, tormented, and killed, have placed powerful curses on them. The auras of kidnappers are indeed storage tanks for spiritual curses and destructive thought forms emanating from traumatized Nigerians they have kidnapped, agonized, and killed. The hunter must eventually become the hunted. What is the difference between religion and magic? Religion is the worship of the everlasting Father and acceptance of whatever comes your way wholeheartedly. Magic means getting something from supernatural sources, placing curses, agonizing for days and months, and craving for bad things to happen to the kidnappers who devastated you. Simply means you are invoking magical powers to work for you.
Most people inherit negative and harmful energies and so-called helpful compound spirits from their ancestors. Negative energies can linger in the spirit world for tons and tons of years. They are often generated by our ancestors through some unresolved issues and conflicts, certain spiritual pacts, intense anger, regrets, and etc., and passed on from one generation to another in a particular family. These passed on negative energies often takes the form of curses and family karma.
Do you know that unfulfilled promises and shabby treatment of your elderly parents, neglecting your elderly parents who brought you into this world, can instigate the manifestation of spiritual problems in your life? Do you know that allowing your elderly parents to constantly think about you negatively and regret having you as a child, etc., simply means they are invoking evil spirits to come after you? There are many strange things, almost too strange for one to believe, but because one is ignorant about them does not mean they are not real. Permit me to shed light on a spiritual attack problem involving a young married couple, their little infant daughter, and the husband's mother. The husband had promised his mother that if his wife gives birth to a baby girl, the baby girl will bear a name. Eventually, his wife gave birth to a baby girl, but her son forgot to fulfill the promise he made to her. The young married couple rather came up with a sweet name for their infant daughter. The husband's mother was deeply unhappy about their infant daughter not bearing a name as promised by her son.
Follow us on Facebook at Guru They Say, Instagram at Guru They Say, Twitter at Guru They Say, and YouTube Desires Pathfinder TV.